Wisconsin Eye is at the West Bend Library. We're interviewing the Republican candidates in the February 17th primary in the 20th Senate District, interviewing former State Representative Duey Stroebel of the town of Cedarburg. Duey, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Hi, Steve.
No Democrats in the April 7th primary, so it's pretty much a winner-take-all primary.
That is
right?
correct.
Okay. If you're elected, one of the first things you'll do, as you're well aware, will be voting on the next state budget. So the provisions that Governor Walker announced last week. So can we start talking about some of those?
Fire away.
The governor chose to not go with any of the tax and fee increases that the Secretary of Transportation recommended, instead recommending an additional $1.3 million in bonding. As you're aware, as a former member of the Assembly, we're bonding at $991 in this biennium. So how do you feel about the governor's recommendation for the state to go deeper in debt for transportation, sir?
Well, I have some problems with borrowing more money. Generally, my whole philosophy on government is it needs to be smaller. We need lower taxes, we need lower spending, and we need less regulation. And as far as the DOT specifically, we do need to look very critically, I believe, at the DOT budget as it sits right now. We need to do an audit of the DOT. We need to look at, some of the overhead and see that we're actually getting, bricks and mortar from our DOT, and we need to look at some of the projects they undertake. I mean, there's certainly been a proliferation of roundabouts, and I'm not saying in some places they don't work, but there's a lot of them out there, and they're very expensive. And can we really afford that? And also, I think you look at a number of other items, pedestrian bridges, bike paths, things like that, they're not necessarily essential to transportation, and whether we can really afford those things in this day and age, I think we need to look very critically at that. And then I think what we also need to do in conjunction with our Department of Transportation is we need to look at prevailing wage. Prevailing wage is really driving up costs, and has for years. It's not a market rate situation. And saddling our public works projects with having to pay prevailing wage when it's not the market is another way we can really achieve some cost savings. And I think that's what we need to look at, before we look at doing anything else with that transportation budget. Those two things are critical.
The governor's transportation budget said, look, I'm funding our share of the Stillwater Bridge and the Hone Bridge in Milwaukee, and $800 million for the zoo interchange, and to continue to keep in place the rebuilding of the interstate from Madison to Illinois. Do you think DOT's maintenance and construction schedule is too ambitious?
Well, I mean, those projects have been planned for a while now, and I think most of them are underway, and I think we need to finish those projects. But again, we need to look at the entire budget. We just can't pluck this, that, and this and that from that whole budget. We need to look at the entire budget. We need to make sure that our incomes are equal to our outflows. And again, going back to prevailing wage and going back to looking at some of those details in our budgets that we spend on transportation, I think we need to look very critically at those things. And I'm confident we're going to find some significant cost savings if we implement those two changes. And to even consider anything else until we do those two things, I don't see any merit in that.
So until there is an audit of DOT, you wouldn't vote for any of the tax and fee increases that the Secretary recommended last November then?
No, we are a high-tax state, as I said, and I want to go in the other direction, not the direction of more. I want to go in the direction of less. And I think like I said, those two things are things we need to look at before I'm willing to think any further about the DOT and the monies they get.
The governor's recommendation to spin off the UW system. It's got a $6 billion budget, 19% of which comes from state GPR. He would spin it off on July 1 of 2016, give them the autonomy and the independence to run the system. How do you feel about that plan, sir?
I have problems with that. Right now, we pay 19% of the UW system's budget, and we're looking at a 13% decrease to that. That in total is a net decrease of 2.5%. I mean, I don't think the sky is falling for 2.5%. And we need to remember, we're dealing with an organization here, the UW system, that was squirreling away millions and millions of dollars just 2 years ago. So I think I'm for autonomy, and I want them to have efficiencies and have that opportunity. But let's see them display their ability to utilize efficiencies, and then I'll start to look at some autonomy. But right now, I don't think they've got a track record to prove it, and especially when I see all the I guess, hand-wringing over a 2.5% decrease in their overall budget. I've got concerns about that.
So you support then the 150 cut in GPR for the UW system for both of the years?
Yes, I do.
You'd vote for that?
Yes, I would.
Do you think...
And I'm a UW-Madison graduate, undergrad and grad degree, but I think they need to tighten their belt, and I think that that's something that everyone else in the state has done, including our municipalities and various governmental entities throughout the state, and I think they need to continue to do that also.
Under the governor's proposal, the authority could set tuition, and there would be no legislative oversight. Having lawmakers give oversight of the UW system is they've been exercising it for more than 150 years. Would you be willing to spin off the UW to that degree? Again,
we're not too far away from that debacle just a couple of years ago where we had, I think it was 5 years of the maximum increase of 5.5% tuition increases.
Yes.
When we were finally able to look into their books and you know, it wasn't transparent, but we were able to see that they were squirreling away, I think it was over $1 billion. It was lots of money. And with that hardly in the rearview mirror, no, I'm not ready to give them autonomy on tuition. Again, I want to see how they're able to implement cost savings and efficiencies, and seeing, look, their success at that. Then let's talk about more autonomy.
Okay. Also in the governor's budget, the governor said if we lost the bucks, the eventual drain would be $10 million a year, more than $100 million. So he's recommending the so-called jock tax that the speaker came up with as a proposal, $220 million in state bonding if the current owners and past owners, Senator Cole, and local governments came up with $300. Is that a plan you could support?
Not the way it's spelled out there right now. It's too early even to tell what's going on with this deal. We don't know where the site's going to be. We don't know what other ancillary development might be occurring. And the city and the county of Milwaukee haven't even anteed up anything yet. So I think all that talk is very premature. I want to do what's best for the taxpayer of the state of Wisconsin. And I like the bucks. They're good for the state of Wisconsin. But again, whatever we do has to be through that prism of what's best for the taxpayer of the state of Wisconsin.
What do you think we've learned from providing some tax support for both the Brewers at Miller Park and Lambeau Field? The lessons of that?
I think we've learned that the public is at their max with the taxes that they want to pay to our government in the state. And they only have so many resources. So we need to be good conservators of those resources. And that's why things like this must be looked at so critically.
The budget deficit meant that the governor couldn't recommend a cut in income taxes, and he's really focusing on the property taxes. Would you like to see tax cut going beyond controlling property taxes that's in the budget?
I would. I'd like to see that. And I think in the end that's going to benefit the state of Wisconsin economically. You know, we're in a competitive environment here. We're dealing with other states that we compete against. And I think that in order to do that, to create that economic growth and job creation and things that we all know will add to our quality of life, we are still a high-tax state. We've made progress, but that's our reputation, and deservedly so, even now as a high-tax state. We need to fix that, and that's going to benefit ourselves economically in the long run.
Some of the talk in the Capitol is, as you're well aware, let's get rid of the personal property tax, perhaps get rid of the corporate tax, or cut the personal income taxes. So which tax cut would you most support?
I can give you a little insight on the personal property tax. I led a symposia this past summer in the Capitol where we looked at the personal property tax and had a lot of good testimony on it, a lot of good analysis and research was done in that regard. And many of our neighbors do not have the personal property tax anymore. And I see it as not being pro-business. It's onerous, it's unequally applied, and it's a self-reporting mechanism that just is not equitable. And when you look at the cost for the taxpayer to prepare that form, and you look at the cost for our municipalities to administrate that form, I'm really not sure if there's much of a net gain there. Right now there's 47 exemptions to the personal property tax out there. So, I mean, it's a patchwork. Basically, it's Main Street, Wisconsin that's still paying the personal property tax. The businesses that haven't been able to hire the lobbyists to go to Madison and get rid of it. So I have a problem with that. And yeah, I mean, you commented on a whole lots of issues regarding our tax system, but I'll give you some personal, perspective on the personal property tax, and I think that one needs to go.
How much is the personal property tax now raising?
It's raising just under $300 million a year for the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, that's 1/3 of the corporate income tax. That's interesting. The governor's plan to drug test those who want to receive public benefits, or your position?
I'm firmly in favor of that. You know, the whole idea is for people to get off the public dole, to be freed of the chains of entitlement, and that is something that one of the first things you need to do in order to get a job. We see it everywhere. Take a drug test. And how do we expect people to be able to succeed and get a job if they're on drugs? That's a problem. So I believe we need to have the resources out there to help people so they can overcome these addictions and they can improve their lives. And we're just not going to leave them out in the cold, believe me, because we're a compassionate country and that's what we need to do. But we're certainly not helping anyone just by, just I guess, seeing that they're stuck in this system for years and years and years, and we don't attempt to address some of the root problems that are causing those issues.
I've heard Senator Fitzgerald say that if you're elected on April 7th, the whole right-to-work debate will begin over again. So that assumes that you're willing to you lead the charge in the Senate for right-to-work?
Sure. Well, I've heard him say that also, and I certainly will lead the charge for right-to-work, because it's what we need to do in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, you look at the statistics. There's a federal study, I think, from the early 70s to 2011, and it showed much greater job growth in right-to-work states than non-right-to-work states, and also showed greater income growth in right-to-work states than non-right-to-work states. So I think there alone, you've got a pretty strong argument. And then you also have just the issue of freedom of association. Why should you be compelled to join an organization? And I think it's going to take this state to another level. Our neighbors are doing it. And again, we go back to competitiveness. I think it's something we need to do. And, you also look at, it's not going to make unions go away, nor should it. But certainly there are unions who do a fantastic job of providing value to their members for their dues in terms of apprenticeships or job training, things like that. And those unions will continue to thrive. But the ones that don't, the ones that just look at the ability to be able to collect these dues just because they can and really don't provide, yeah, I believe they're going to have a hard time attaining and retaining and attracting new members unless they change their ways. And I think it's good for the state. It's going to be good for our economic development for everyone, unions and all involved.
So it sounds like you would be the lead Senate sponsor on a right-to-work bill?
Well, if nobody's done it before then, I'd be more than happy to have that opportunity.
1 in 5, as you know, Wisconsin residents get their health care from the Medicaid system. Mm-hmm. The Wisconsin Hospital Association says our reimbursement rates are the second lowest in the nation. Mm-hmm. The governor's budget doesn't increase those rates. Do you think they should be increased?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that all goes back to the federal government and the reimbursements, of course, that they are providing to us. And I'm very happy, of course, that the governor did not expand the Medicaid as was asked in that last session. Mm-hmm. This is the only time in the state where people at 100% and below the poverty level have full access to health care, and I think that's great. But we just got done talking about Obamacare. Well, it's been a while now, to tell you the truth. And that was supposed to take care of people from the poverty level and above. So what I see this Medicaid expansion that was Governor Walker was pressured to do, is just a way to offload a good percentage of those people who are supposed to be going on to Obamacare onto the states. Again, we know Obamacare is unsustainable, it's not workable, and this was, I guess, part of the master plan to able to make this thing work, to download that onto the states. I'm glad we didn't, because it's an obligation and liability for the taxpayers of Wisconsin that we just can't expose those people to. And there's a lot of things to fix in the healthcare business, I'll tell you that. Obamacare has not been the way to do it, and I think we're just starting to see more and more of the reasons of why that system has failed.
We've talked about 6 or 7 issues. Is there any other central issue that's important in your campaign that I haven't asked about, sir?
We've talked about prevailing wage.
Yes.
We've talked about right to work.
Yes, sir.
We've talked about tax decreases. I think those are really some of the big issues out there. Okay. The GAB, yes. I think we need to certainly continue to do work with the GAB and basically reconstruct that into something that's going to serve more of what its original intended purpose was for.
How do you like the governing structure of the GAB? Six retired judges, would you keep that and focus on the staff, or would you kind of blow up the whole agency?
I think you really need to blow up the whole agency.
Okay.
I see some benefits to retired judges, but right now the system's flawed how that works. It truly isn't. The governor really doesn't have the ability to pick from a wide array of retired judges. He's kind of fed a small quantity that's come from a small handful of people who have handpicked those people. So it's really not what it was set up to do. It's not making that happen right now. That's why we need to make that change.
You were able to self-finance your campaign for Congress. Are you going to self-finance your campaign for the Senate?
I've been getting an incredible amount of grassroots support and endorsements in this whole race. Right now in Washington County where we sit, I've been endorsed by 22 of the 30 county supervisors. I've been endorsed by 5 of the 8 aldermen in West Bend. I've received incredible support from the mayor of West Bend. I've received endorsements from everyone except one elected official in Hartford and Slinger, everyone from Richfield, from the town of Polk. And so it's been great. And I've also, probably very heartening to me, is I've received endorsements of 35 of the people that I served with in the state assembly. They know I'm a conservative, they know I'm a leader, they know I can get things done, they know I'm willing to take on the tough issues and fight. And I'm very heartened by that support, and I'm told that's pretty unheard of, to have that kind of support from the body that I had served in the past. And so all those things are leading up to some great support and endorsements that I have received, including some monetary support that I've gotten also.
Okay. And then finally, I want to ask you, do you want to highlight any differences between you and your 2 opponents in the primary on February 17th?
Well, I think one of the differences, I am a strong supporter of school choice. And one of my opponents has stated, quote, I don't think public monies should be going to private schools, and that, quote, he cannot sign on to school choice. We as Republicans have been working for 25 years to expand school choice. Okay. And I'm thrilled to death that the governor has decided to take the cap off, because we know those options need to be there. We know that a lot of the schools, the vast majority of the schools in the state of Wisconsin do a fantastic job of educating our children. But we can't deny that there are some that aren't. And we need to give the parents of the children in those schools options. And I believe that's what school choice does, gives them options, and it makes, I believe, the public schools better. And also when you look at the cost of the vouchers of school choice, right now the average cost to educate a child in the state of Wisconsin is over $12,000. Mm-hmm. In MPS, it's over $14,000.
Yes, it is.
Look at the vouchers that we pay. They're about $7,500. So when you add that component in, practically half the cost that we are paying to support a voucher student over someone enrolled in the public schools, and just introducing that whole element of choice. For someone to say that they don't buy into school choice and they want to move away for it, I don't know what they've been doing for the last 25 years, but they certainly haven't been paying attention.
Very good. Thank you. Former State Representative Duey Stroebel is one of 3 GOP candidates in the February 17th primary in the 20th Senate District. Mr. Stroebel, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.